Welcome to the Fai Masterclass here at the Fabled Academy. Today we are taking a look at the Fai basics with Sebastian Grondal. He won the European Champions Battle in 2022 with Fai. Sebastian, welcome to the Academy.
Thank you for inviting me again. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and I'm so excited to talk again with you about Fai.
It's been quite a while. It's over a year now that I played in the tournament at the Champions Battle and had the interview with you. So there are bound to be some good updates to talk about with the Fai developments.
Yeah, it's especially interesting, I think, for beginners to talk about Fai too, because he's quite of an easy hero to pick up at first, but there are different playstyles to talk about and different strategies to dive into. And also with the newly announced Living Legends format, we can bring back Fai in full OTK combo.
Exactly.
All right, we will talk about the Living Legend format in a separate video, but now let's dive into the basics with Fai. For the viewers, tell us a little bit more. What is your experience with Fai?
I played him a lot as he came out last year in Uprising, and it was sort of a nice new breath of life for me because I played a lot of cats before. I was very excited about a new ninja to play and explore, and it just turned out, very fortunately, that he was very good when he came out because of a few equipment pieces that he had access to at that point, being the stubby hammers and the pouncing wings, which worked very well together. And then I played him also at the World Championship last year and had a 3-2 record with him, which was fine. I had some good games into Icelander and Ultim that I had mastered very well before that and beat. And then 2 matchups into other Aggro Decks, a Dash and another Fai, where I got high rolled like crazy. I've never had 2 games where I got stomped more than that. So that was something. Yeah, that's pretty much it, because I stopped playing him mostly after that just to explore other heroes and sort of broaden my perspective a little bit into other classes.
From a beginner's perspective, what are the different playstyles available to pick with Fai?
It started out with being an OTK deck way back when he came out, but now he is more an aggro mid-range deck. He's not very good at blocking, and that is sort of one of the key things that define him. So he wants to be attacking, making your opponents block. And he has 2 distinct sort of modifications for his deck. He has the Emberblade list and he has the Kodachi list, and they sort of have varying strengths to them. Emberblade list is generally better at putting out slightly more damage than the Kodachi list on average per turn, where the Kodachi list is very good at optimizing the Mask of Momentum to threaten card draws if your opponent doesn't block. And then it also has access to cards like Even Bigger that work very well with the Kodachis and giving non-go again cards go again. And those are 2 of the main diverging roads in his builds. And then depending on which one you choose, they will generally be good against different things. And that ties into, we're going to talk about matchups. That ties into the matchups. Because I remember the Emberblade list was definitely the best one when he first came out. Because it was more about the raw damage that you could deal to kill your opponent rather than making them block. And in my opinion, this is definitely not the common opinion necessarily. In my opinion, I think the Emberblade list is still better because it averages more damage. And unfortunately, I haven't done statistics. I was debating with some of my friends doing a sort of like a testing thing where you would sample hands for both decks and then see how much damage would be produced on average per turn for each. Haven't done that yet, but might do that in the future. It is for sure that the Emberblade list average produces more damage because the weapon attacks for 1 more combined than the Kodachi stuff. And then also because it's Draconic, you will on average get your Phoenix Flame back more often with the Emberblade than with the Kodachi list. So the average damage is somewhere around 1.5 more per turn, if we're just guesstimating it. I think that matters a lot. The Kodachi list, though, has strengths through the threatened mass triggers. So that is a thing that you could consider if you wanted to build. But I think the Emberblade list, if you're getting started just now, is a little simpler, and I think on average will lead to more win percentage for you.
You already touched about it, that the different playstyles are also varying with your matchups and how efficient they are. So let's talk about what do you would say to a beginner are the best matchups to run into with Fai?
Generally, Fai is really good against opponents that just present raw damage back to him and cards that need to be blocked. Because historically has a lot of problems against decks like, for example, Usuri, which presents cards that are difficult to block, and if you don't block them properly, take a lot of downside, for example, from Command and Conquer or whatever the other cards are that Usuri presents. But there are a lot of them that have very damning effects for Fai. Stripping cards from arsenal, stripping cards from hand. And Fai just can't block it efficiently. So generally when they hit the board, he just ends up saying, I don't block, and I take whatever negative downsides that come with that. So those are generally the bad matchups. The good matchups are other matchups where the opponent really likes blocking, but is not good at presenting on hits. Or matchups where the opponent is simply just presenting raw damage. Like, for example, a Viscera deck or a Briar deck, where most of the damage presented is just raw damage. And it might be hard to block the damage, but Fai doesn't care because he doesn't want to block anyways. And that's generally the matchup roster. Then there are matchups that fall in between that, where they can do a little bit of both. And of course, even though the raw damage matchups like the Viscera and the Briar decks are technically not decks you need to block, it's still an aggro versus aggro mirror. And none of you are really that good at blocking, so you end up having high roll games sometimes where either player high rolls the other, and it's just how the game works out. But that's what you accept when you play a hero like Fai. You don't block very well, and sometimes the game high rolls in either way. So you might be the high roller as well, of course.
Talking about the race decks and also the decks that want to put out a lot of damage in the first couple of turns, we just have had the Bright Lights pre-release weekend. What do you think is Fai against the new mech meta?
We've been talking quite a bit about it in my just like general play group, and we think that Fai is a fairly well placed deck right now. After Lexi rotates out, I don't think Fai is very good into Lexi. After Lexi rotates, we think he does have a place in the meta. We haven't tested him against Max very much yet. Granted, because the set hasn't actually been out yet. We haven't had the time to test online. He seems like he has the tools. He hasn't lost anything since the past couple metas, the past couple ban restriction announcements. And really the thing that's mostly holding him back right now is Lexi. To me, it seems that he has at least somewhere around a high B tier-ish place into the new meta, maybe an A tier place. So it's yet to be seen. We'll have to see how that playtests out. After Lexi rotates, he might just have that place in.
When you want to build a Fai deck from the ground up, what are the key cards that a player needs to pick up from the Majestic slot? And afterwards, we also talk about the Legendaries.
It's really to pick up Fai, as you said, as a beginner's class or beginner's hero, because most of his cards are actually just common and rare. A lot of the key cards in the deck are just the 0 for 3 go again cards that are draconic. Some of the 1 for 4 go again cards that are draconic. And those cost nothing. You can pick those up for cents. But then there are a couple of important Majestics. I don't think you can realistically play the deck competitively without. And that's the first one is Art of War, the most important Majestic in the deck. And you absolutely need 3 copies of that. You can't go to a major tournament without 3 copies of that in your deck and expect to do well. It's just that important. It's your high roll card. And I don't think I need to explain why it's so good in the deck, because it's go maybe watch some coverage from last year, Fai being broken, and you'll see how broken it is. It's a very good card, so you need 3 copies of it. And then cards that are perhaps not necessary in the deck, but optional and add to your win percentage is Command and Conquer. Generally a pretty good card to have access to in your deck, because especially if you're playing the Emberblade list, you're not presenting that many on-hits. But Command and Conquer can be that on-hit effect for you. And then the card also blocks 3, you need to do that sometimes. And a third benefit, it's the popper for the Dromai matchup, which having somewhere around 3 to to 5 or 6 poppers in your deck in a Drone Man matchup, I think makes that matchup a 90% win for you. An important card, then Strike. Also not a necessary card. I think this card is actually less necessary than Command and Conquer, but also a card that you might want to run. It has some good synergy with Soaring Strike, that when it hits, you can give a card in your hand go again. Works very well with Lightning Strike, and it is good at making some of your turns that are awkward with, for example, all red hands, still work with an Lightning Strike, because you can still just move those red cards away that you can't pay for and then play in Lightning Strike. It's always a card that doesn't high roll, but it makes sure that you don't low roll too much in your hands, and then also blocks 3. You might want to run Spreading Flames in your deck, but I think that's a very cheap Majestic from Uprising, so you should be able to pick that up for pretty much pennies. And then all the other Majestics in the deck that you might want to run cost like nothing. I think it's pretty much just the 3 OGs, the Art of War, and then the Command and Conquer, and then the Lightning Strike, in that order of importance.
Those are also all the generics, like you said, that you could also run in other decks when you want to play another hero down the line when starting to play Flesh and Blood. But for Fai, there are a few legendary options that you can look into, and a few of those are pretty important. So tell us a little bit more about the legendaries that we have to be available on Fai.
Of course, there is the Fjendal Spring Tunic, also a generic, useful in 80% of Flesh and Blood lists. So it's also a good time to get it, which is reprinted in Bright Lights. I think the price is fairly low right now for a tunic, at least. It's a low price. That is an important legendary. It's very good into certain matchups. And then into other matchups, you might want to play the Flamescale Furnace for a chest instead. And this card is very good at blocking very important on-hits into something like Bravo, for example, where the crush effects are the most important thing. If you can block that, then you might just have enough time to run them over. And I don't think the Flamescale is also slightly expensive because of Dromai players also wanting it. Might be like an $80 or $100 Euro card, but it's a good piece, and it's definitely worth picking up. After that, I think the price drops quite a bit, because the next piece is Tiger Stripe Shuko, and I don't think that one is too expensive, but it's an important piece because you don't have any other hand pieces that are as good as that one, because you don't have Stubby Hammers. That card is banned because it's broken. Tiger Stripe Shuko is also good though. Blocks 2 and has the +1 effect if you play two attack base cards or lower in a turn. And as Fai, you can very often end up doing that because of your hero power, bringing back the Phoenix Flames from the graveyard, checking the 1 out of the 2 or base a turn. And that combos very well with the Salt the Wound that you often play, because it has 2 or less, and the Lava Burst because it also has 2 or less base, even though they get additional pluses from their own effect. Yeah, so that piece is also very important. And then I think that's it for the legendaries, because after that, the key pieces are something like Snapdragon Scalers, a common from Welcome to Wraith, and we have Mask of Pouncing Lynx, and I think that's generally what you want to run. Oh, of course, I wasn't thinking about the Mask of Momentum, of course, which is very good to certain matchups and very good with the Kodachis. But I would say that piece is not necessary for you to get from the start. If you want to run the Emberblade list, you don't need the Momentum, you just need the Pouncing Lynx. And if you want to run the Kodachis, then you do need the Momentum. But if you don't want to run that, then you can skip the Momentum to start with.
Yeah. I think it's also safe to mention for beginners that when you want to start off, then it's also a good idea to rather have a low count on legendaries, but pick those that are really important, like the Tiger Stripe Shukos, for example, and then build your way up.
Yeah, because the Tiger Stripe is a very important piece. But then the Momentum, you can just build Emberblade Fire, and then you don't need the Momentum. Then you can just use the Pouncing Lynx instead, because Pouncing Lynx is, when you use that card, it's like +6 or +7 damage anyways. It's a very good headpiece. Pouncing Lynx is definitely fine for that. But then you need either the Tunic or the Furnace, I'd say, to be competitively viable at least. You could find other chests to substitute until you have them, but if you're going to a tournament, then Tunic and Flamescale are important pieces.
after we have built our deck, what are the main combos that we want to pull off with Fai, depending on the playstyle we have chosen?
In general, Fai is the key at efficient turns. He has all these 0 for 3 cards that do essentially the same thing. So Fai is just good at playing the 0 for 3 and then pitching a blue, attack with the blade, then bringing like a Phoenix Flame back, attack with that, and then attack with a Lava Burst. And just that as a 3-card hand is incredibly efficient. It's 3, 6, 7, 13 damage for a 3-card hand with the Lava Burst, which is really good for a 3-card hand. And then he has even more high rolly things that he can do when he's setting things up properly. So he's doing these normal hands that I just mentioned on a single turn basis, where he's just 0 for 3, 1 for 4, Ember Blade, Phoenix Flame. And then when he draws an Art of War or a Spreading Flames, he can arsenal that and then set up for a 5-card hand that can really deal a lot of damage because he combines +1 effect from Art of War and the +1 effect from Spreading Flames with a lot of cards after it. So he can exponentially deal more damage on a single turn from 5 cards. He plays a deck that unloads his hand every turn to just pressure your opponent. And then when he finds an important card, he arsenals it for a 5-card hand that can deal a lot of damage in a turn where the pieces line up. I think that's the general idea that you just need to understand. Play just good average turns, arsenal, Art of War, or Spreading Flames when you see them, and then play those on a 5-card hand turn.
Right. So when we are looking at the Kodachi list with Fai, how would the strategy change up depending on the meta? Because I already saw in a few tournaments people coming up with a lot of ideas on how to tackle, for example, also fatigue decks and counter those with the Kodachi lists.
Yeah, I think you don't counter fatigue with Kodachi necessarily. I think Fai is the ultimate fatigue killer anyways, because I remember when I was testing him out way back when he came out, I had a really good friend who played a lot of Oldhim, and he sat down, tried to fatigue me, and he couldn't. Because Fai just has to open the 2 for 3 weapon that is really efficient, plus the Phoenix Flame from the graveyard. So he deals so much damage each turn that he always leaks damage, basically. So I think don't need the Kodachis to counter fatigue. Fai automatically counters fatigue. He's just unfatigable, generally. But Kodachis have a different power, and that is that they're really good with the momentum, and then really good, even bigger than that. And I personally think that Emberblade is better. I could see why Kodachis could be a viable option. I can't definitively say which option is better. I can only say, of course, what I feel to be better.
Yeah.
But both options are good, I think. I think they're both good picks.
Then when having learned the basics to play Fai, the play patterns, when you are coming down to your first games, what are the main mistakes to avoid when playing Fai?
I think I heard Brody say this last week as well on your Lexi thing, but it's not blocking enough. And it sounds really weird because I just talked about how Fai doesn't block. I mean, he can't block 2s in his deck. He can't put cards in front of his opponent's attacks. But sometimes it is actually necessary. And that's the thing. I think the thing that makes a good Fai player and a good aggro player in general is knowing that sometimes you have to block. It's not very often, but when you need to block, it's really important that you block. And I can't give you a heuristic for when that is. That just clearly indicates when you should block, because you need to figure that out by playing the deck and then assessing each situation on your own. And that is part of the skill of the deck and a part of the skill of playing Flesh and Blood. You need to practice assessing those situations. And when you get good at assessing those situations, that means you're becoming a good player. So that's what you want to practice for. But be on the lookout for that. Even though your hand looks like it's bad at blocking, or maybe you're in the mindset of Fai doesn't block, I just take all the damage all the time, still think about blocking sometimes, because it might be the difference between winning and losing a game. I can give it just a short example for you to to showcase what I mean here. Last year when I played the World Championships, I was playing Fai into Icelander with some of my buddies from Finland while testing. And he told me that I am the only Fai he has ever played that could consistently beat him. And he told me that the reason why I could consistently beat him is because I blocked him more than other Fais did. And it sounds really weird, but that was it, because when he played his like 3, 4, 8 attacks, the Bull Lander list, and I blocked with 2 cards, that blocked for 3 each because I happened to have 2 block 3s in my hand. You know, he looked at me weird at first because he was like, oh, you're Fai, you don't block, that doesn't make any sense. But then, you know, I took less damage, and me taking less damage meant that I had more time to set up for a good hand. And my hand was not going to deal that much more damage from not blocking anyways, so I might as well block and have more time to kill him later. Even though it's counterintuitive sometimes, blocking can be the right play, but you have to be assessing when it is. And that is probably one of the things that Fai is absolutely best for practicing in the game. You're a deck that's bad at blocking, but sometimes you still block. That is one of my key advices for playing Fai and practicing him.
Is there a bonus tip that you want to give beginner players here when they're starting off to play Fai?
Bonus tip. I think a lot of the skill from Fai actually comes from his deck building. Other than the thing I mentioned before about blocking, I think his gameplay is very, let's call it one-dimensional, right? It has one plan, and it's attacking most of the time, and then arsenaling a few key cards. The deck building in Fai is a little particular because he actually doesn't have that many good cards. For example, like you look at a Lexi list, Lexi has 30 cards more, 40 cards more that she could put in her deck if she wanted to, and it would still be a good deck. Fai doesn't have that. He's running on thin margins, so when you build a Fai deck, it sort of barely functions. And actually, generally, I feel like you put in 3 or 6 copies at the end of your list that you don't really want to have in your list, but you're sort of forced to put them in because you don't have anything else for those slots. And what you put in those 6 final slots, or like the 9 final slots in your Fai deck, is what shows the skill of your deck building when running Fai. Because it's very easy to put in 3 cards that don't make your deck very much better. You can also put in cards that actually make your deck significantly better and run really well with your strategy. When you get more comfortable playing Fai and you've tested some games, I would start thinking about what seems like core cards in the deck and what seems like cards that you could switch out for other cards to try to test those or see if they work better with your strategy. And then see where that takes you, because the deck is running on a very thin margin. And if you can find the exact perfect 60 cards, or something close to that, then you're standing really strong. And there are a lot of percentage points to be gained from the sort of minute details that you get from the last 9 copies of cards in your deck. Play some Fai. It's actually a fun deck. It's a really good deck to start out the game with. So I do recommend playing Fai. And then, you know, when you get comfortable with that, you have some of the generic pieces if you bought those, and then you can move into other decks as well. I think Fai is a very good start-off point, because you can get good percentage points in tournaments with not that much experience, and you can build a lot of skills by playing Fai. I would recommend him as a good start deck, for example.
So we will also look into a deck list for playing Fai at the Living Legend format in one of our next videos. But here at the end, Sebastian, do you want to give any shoutouts?
I want to shout out Alex at Tales of Wraith for bringing me on these videos. It's very fun.
It's very fun to do this with you too. Thank you for being here. Sebastian, thank you so much for taking the time today and diving with us into Fai.
Oh, pleasure. It was super fun. I mean, I haven't visited this guy for a while, so it's good to go back and reevaluate some of the key points I've learned from playing him and the old cards that I haven't touched in a while. So it's my pleasure for sure.
And to all the viewers, thank you for tuning in today's masterclass. If you found this lesson helpful, leave a like, and if you have further questions, drop them down in the comments for Sebastian and myself. Subscribe to the channel to see future masterclasses and check out more videos on Fai on the channel.